Hello and welcome back to Everyone's a Critic. I'm joining me today. You might remember from my episode on the Star Wars VHSs on VHS era, Jordan Ramirez. Thanks, Jordan, for coming on.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and today, as you probably surmised from the title, we are talking about literally my favorite movie of all time, but Jordan has a different opinion, as you probably have guessed, coming from the show. Yeah, Jordan, would you say your opinion is similar to Peter Griffin's?
I'm never familiar with what he said on that show, but
Okay,
no, it's not going to be on the same level as him.
okay. Well, I don't know if you're familiar with the meme. There's an episode where they're in a safe room and they all think they're gonna die, and um, Peter Griffin says, and they all like say like things they've always wanted to say but never had the chance to. And Peter Griffin says,
I did not care for The Godfather.
and then like all the rest of the family gets angry at him.
Uh, yeah,
You're not
that
familiar with that meme?
no, sorry, I haven't watched that meme, so no, it doesn't ring a bell. Sorry.
Okay, it's fine. But before we begin, you know, again, completely fine. Not everyone has to love all the quote unquote considered classics out there. So, as I've said plenty of times, this podcast is about respecting opinions, not disrespecting them. But just before I turn it over to you, Jordan, let
Hmm.
me just state my opinion on The Godfather and why I love it so much. And well, what can be said that hasn't been said about The Godfather before? Actually, where do you even start with The Godfather and why personally I think it is the literal greatest film of all time, as basic of an opinion as that may be. Um, God. Should I talk about the cinematography? Should I talk about the performances? Should I talk about the story? The everything.
Hmm.
This, I mean, first off, beautiful musical score, of course.
Hmm.
Just really iconic. Great performances across the board. I know that, and I've mentioned this before on a previous episode. The Don Vito voice is so often parodied and people do impressions of it so much that it's become kind of a joke by this point. But like, yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry. Like, even with all the parodies that have been done about it over the decades, like Brando's Brando still delivers such a complex performance that is at times chilling, at times there's a sliver of empathy in there. Uh, but of course, it's not just him. We've got Al Pacino before he, kind of became a character of himself, giving a, for the most part, understated performance, but it's like it's not just the two Godfathers. Like acting is excellent across the board. And even outside of the musical score, outside of the acting, it's beautifully shot. Like there are literal frames that could look like something that came out today. And that actually might be more of that might be more of a knock, honestly, because the cinematography is probably better than a lot of movies that came out today.
Mhm.
Uh, and it's like just it has like such a great use of like shadows, but not just but it knows when to also how do I say this with the cinematography, like, but also films like the vista, like the sweeping vistas beautifully. But I'm saying something most people agree about The Godfather. Like, I'm not, right now, I'm not really saying anything new. What I would say that's kind of new, and that I think a lot of people miss about The Godfather, and some might kind of misinterpret about The Godfather, is that it's not quite the how do I say this? It's not quite the mob propaganda film a lot of people like to think of it as. It's actually a story about how the promise of family, about about how basically corruption can consume you under the promise of family. If you think about it, Vito Corleone may have the guise of this like beloved family man. But when we're actually introduced to him, like he's literally telling a man whose daughter was assaulted that he will only help him out if he pledges loyalty to that.
America's made my fortune, and I raised my daughter in the American fashion. I gave her freedom, but I taught her never to dishonor her family. She found a boyfriend, not an Italian. She went to the movies with him. She stayed out late. I didn't protest. 2 months ago, he took her for a drive with another boyfriend. They made her drink whiskey, and then they tried to take advantage of her. She resisted. She kept her honor. So they beat her like an animal. When I went to the hospital, her nose was broken. Her jaw was shattered, held together by wire. She couldn't even weep because of the pain. But I wept. Why did I weep? She was the light of my life. Beautiful girl. Now she will never be beautiful again.
We've known each other many years, but this is the first time you ever came to me for counsel, for help. I can't remember the last time that you invited me to your house for a cup of coffee. Even though my wife is godmother to your only child. But let's be frank, you never wanted my friendship. And you were afraid to be in my debt. What have I ever done to make you treat me so disrespectfully? If you'd come to me in friendship, then the scum that ruined your daughter would be suffering this very day. And if by chance an honest man like yourself should make enemies, then he would become my enemies. And then they would fear you.
Be my friend. Godfather.
And that's not a knock on the film's writing. That shows that it's a character study of how toxic, of how even if a family seems quote unquote loving to each other, that toxic ideals can spread across the board. Like you may think of, or maybe not you particularly, Jordan, but I just mean the audience in general may
Mhm.
remember or think of Michael Corleone as this tragic figure who fell to grace and got consumed by the mob, but rewatch it again, he was always kind of a cold asshole. Becoming the Godfather just gave him the excuse to become one because that's how he was taught to treat people outside of his immediate family by Vito
Hmm.
Corleone. And really, he's like his father, is kind of playing the guise of this loving town figure. And Family Man, like he's playing the guise of a goody two shoes war hero who just kind of needs to become the Godfather, to become, to like grant permission to become his true asshole self. Like he basically just sees Kay first off as just like something to play around. And that's also kind of Kay's arc throughout the whole thing, is that she's kind of wondering how much Michael loves her because he doesn't really love her. Oh, instead, like, I mean, he can't even say to her over the phone that he loves her. When he runs away to Italy, he doesn't even really he's just like, don't even bother telling her. Just say I've like just
I thought he ran away to Sicily.
I meant Sicily. I'm sorry.
Hmm.
But but and I should know that I'm Italian. But
Hmm.
what I mean, what I just mean is like he pretty much just ditches her and literally marries a woman because again, that's how his father has taught him to view everyone outside the family basically as property, as toys to basically manipulate and play with. And I just find it sort of like a fascinating character study. Like it could have been such a, oh, woe is this poor guy turning evil, but I think actually kind of making these characters more complex, how there was always a darkness, like even from the beginning, hidden underneath them, makes the story a lot more fascinating and interesting than it could have been. Like again, when he runs away to Sicily, not only does he tell, you know, Kay, his girlfriend, where he's hiding at, he doesn't even think of her when he goes there. Like he literally just moves on to the next girl, and he's
Hmm.
distraught for like a day maybe when the other girl dies, but then he goes back to America and he's like, "Hey, girlfriend, uh, yeah, sorry I haven't kept in touch. Marry me."
Michael, why did you come here? Why? What do you want of me after all this time without even calling or writing?
I came here because I need you, because I care for you,
Please stop it, Michael.
because I want you to marry me.
That's another example of how this is really just a fascinating character study about power dynamics and about family power dynamics having this sort of guise of nobleness, but at the end of the day, actually having like a hidden darkness underneath them, like and like again, using the mob as the perfect example of that. Like you can just look at the very and like and it's not just him, like Sonny sort of represents like that Sonny represents that 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 type of toxic masculinity taken to its
Hmm.
extreme. Like, unlike Michael, who's trying to control it and put on a guise of respectability, kind of like his father, like, nope, Sonny's just like a violent asshole who will just kick anyone's ass if you fuck with his family. Uh,
Hmm.
and and again, it is just sort of like at the end of the day, it's like the Corleones may be a quote unquote loving family, but they aren't a good one and they do not have healthy morals. And that's just it's just like the whole package, the cast, the performance, the cast, the direction, the cinematography, the music, the story, it all just comes together to create what I consider the greatest film ever made. Now, those were my unhinged, unorganized thoughts. But again, now we're at the counterpoint. So, again, Jordan, I respect that this movie didn't work for you. I'm just kind of curious why.
So for me, when I first saw it, I know you mentioned the parodies. Before I watched this movie, I knew what was going to happen because the story, unfortunately, was too predictable for me. The characters, as much as one may like them, they always reminded me of like character actors in film noirs. I know you didn't mention this character, the Johnny Cazale, or no, the John Cazale character. Oh my God, the
Frito.
guy who owns, oh, Frito, yeah. I don't know. He always makes me think of the Elijah Cook Jr. character. He's always very Weasley. He's always very weak-willed. And I thought I had more sympathy for his character than I did for Michael. I mean, Michael, I know he's going to be the head of the family. I think it was a very much understated performance, and I understand that Al Pacino did a great job. But for me, his character felt a little bit too one-dimensional for me, as well as his relationship with Diane Keaton's character. The
Okay.
other issue I had with it was I know that you said it was not meant to be like a propaganda film about organized crime. Looking at it from, I guess, another perspective, it more resembled like using organized crime as a way to represent capitalism in the United States, because you had the head of each family representing like different companies, different family-owned businesses. And when you take down one of the families, it's almost like you have a monopoly. And the monopolization of, the Corleones, well, I don't know, that just was not something for me. But I mean, the lighting was good, and I thought Francis Ford Coppola did a great job. But I liked his other films more personally for me, because when I was listening to his commentary track, and he knew that uh, he made some errors along the way that he knew was a success. I was more in line with his other genre pictures than the film and the sequel that he was famous for. I was more appreciative of that, and I know that he just recently won the Raspberry Award for his most recent effort, Megalopolis, which I heard was not that good, but my favorite moment was when he accepted it. It was like he accepted it with honor, even though he knew it was not a tremendous success, but at least he made something that he knew was not a big hit. So that reason, and I think for me, it just felt like it's a film that I feel it's a little bit too well known. It's a little bit too recognizable. And as much as people like the performances and the script and the direction, I just find that this particular movie to me just didn't feel that interesting, just with the characters.
All right. Well, I'll go through your point, like some of your, points one by one. Um, and again, you know, at the end of the day, it is just an opinion. It is kind of interesting that you said that Francis, that you thought Francis Ford Coppola's other films were better. I will say I did love The Conversation
Hmm.
and Apocalypse Now, especially. After that, I'm not gonna lie. Well, I shouldn't say I've seen the his version of The Outsiders, and I didn't really love it, even when I was part of the target demographic, which was
Hmm.
teenagers. Some of that might have just been that I had read the book for school, and unfortunately, when you read the book, it's a little hard not to compare and contrast and be like, they cut that out, they cut that out. Like after a while, you stop thinking, oh, look, it's Tom Cruise with no lines, and just are just like, can't help but but like compare and contrast it to the book, I haven't seen it since my teens, so I don't know if it would be better now that I'm more distanced from the book. Um,
Hmm.
let's see. Otherwise, I'll be honest, I've pretty much seen mostly just his 70s filmography, The
Hmm.
Outsiders, which again, I didn't like, but might have been too biased towards.
Hmm.
Jack, which I saw when I was a kid. I don't know if that I've heard that it probably has not held up. And Megalopolis, which yeah, I'm sorry, that was terrible. That was kind of the movie I think most people think The Godfather is going in, except with another corrupt organization. Um, I won't spoil it from their scene as you haven't seen it. Fortunately,
Hmm.
unless Francis Ford Coppola goes into town with the film, you can't see it because
Hmm.
it's not streaming anywhere because he wants to like do a tour with it and like bring it around the country, which is
Oh,
ambitious.
basically, he wants to do a road show. He
Yeah,
wants to do a road show of traveling around the country with this film.
yeah, that's ambitious, especially for an almost 90-year-old man, but
Hmm.
it's also like you might it might have been better just cut your losses, dude. Like not everyone like what if people want to see your film but it never goes to where they live?
Hmm.
At least let it be available for on DVD or something.
Hmm.
But other than that, you said that you didn't like how like the mob was a stand-in for capitalism. I'm kind of more curious, what exactly turns you off from that?
So the mob to me, as much as people like watching movies about gangsters and mobsters and organized crime, sometimes I'm more curious about that. I mean, the only other movies I have seen where organized crime is almost like a parody of itself, or if it's done in a different tone. I've seen Heavy Traffic where they did their own version of organized crime in which Michael Corleone or Michael in that film was portrayed as an underground cartoonist as opposed to being as opposed to being the New Dawn. But the organized crime, I just found it very difficult to sympathize with because as much as people would say that it is about family, it is about this, I view it differently because I may have seen it not just as a family owned like entity. I feel it's more like an enterprise, like it's trying to venture out from being like this mom and pop store to now being this sort of large corporate, even though it's a mob entity that is also venturing out with other heads of the respected syndicated crime families. So that was another issue I had with it. And also, as much as people like watching movies with mobsters as anti-heroes and as the heroic character, for me, I used to be one of those guys who used to like it, but then I started to distance myself away from them. So it was impossible for me to sympathize with the organized crime and other families in the movie as sympathetic. So it proved to be problematic.
Well, like I said before, I don't think you're supposed to sympathize with them. I mean, they may be like
Hmm.
the least bad, but like as I mentioned before, the toxic family influence like goes throughout the entire movie. At the very end, Michael is fully corrupted. Like
Hmm.
literally, that's how the ending is framed. It's not really framed as like a heroic, he's saved the day. And
She's hysterical. Hysterical.
Michael, is it true?
Don't ask me about my business, Kate.
Is it true?
Don't ask me about my business.
No.
That Corleone.
And again, as I mentioned before, Vito Corleone is literally introduced only agreeing to beat up men who assaulted a woman if her father pledges loyalty to him. I
Hmm.
don't think we were supposed to, I think that is kind of showing that no, Coppola does not really want us to like the Corleones.
Hmm. Yeah, and I understand that. And the film was more, I know it's supposed to be framed as a fictitious story, but it's also sort of like a docudrama when you watch it. Um, the other issue I think I mentioned with it were like some of the characters. To me, they felt like they felt like character actors I've seen in other film noirs. Where I mentioned the John Cazale character, he reminded me of Elijah Cook Jr. The James Caan character, he almost reminded me of the Neville Brand character when he was on the TV series The Untouchables. And the Michael Corleone character, he almost makes me think of like Robert Mitchum or John Payne or any of those actors who have done sort of like the anti-hero roles where they uh, where they at first know that they were not going to be part of the family business, and then all of a sudden he ultimately has this character arc. And I don't know, it just had that sort of feel to me as much as one likes the characters. It just made me think of character actors and archetypes from
Yeah,
that period. So that was what it made me think of. So I don't know, it was something that I couldn't shake my head about.
I get that. And I guess I'm kind of curious, like, I do also know that, um, Francis Ford Coppola did get his start working for Roger Corman back in the 60s,
Hmm.
so maybe some of that influence was sort of rubbing off on him on
Hmm.
one hand. Yeah, you know who Roger Corman is, right?
Oh yeah, the guy who gave him his start and also other filmmakers their start
Mhm.
when he made Dementia 13 back in Ireland, and he basically got him his start in the industry. And he also Francis also was a writer. He was a screenwriter for films that he did not direct, but he would say that in some of the films that he co-wrote with other screenwriters, that he wrote some of the lines or some of the dialogue in the movies. So it was pretty interesting when I get to hear his voice. That he mentioned before he did The Godfather, he did films like the Rain People, and he was just working on a script for Patton for Fox. And I think before that, he did Finian's Rainbow for Warner Brothers, which was his first movie musical. And I always thought of him more as a filmmaker who ventured into other genres and is always trying to learn something new. I did like I mean people may not like me when I say this. I mean I liked when he did Peggy Sue Got Married and he did his other film Tucker, The Man in His Dream that he made in the late 80s. Which I thought to me I thought was pretty interesting, and I thought it was a much more interesting movie for me, but maybe some people would disagree with me on that.
Oh God, I mean, no, you just reminded me. I have seen Tucker the Man in His Dream. I sorry to tell you this, I did kind of I thought it was good when I saw it, but I can't really remember it. I'm sorry. I'm
Yeah.
sorry about that. But getting back to that, what I was just saying is that Roger Corman, did also make B movies, so maybe
Hmm.
like some of that character actor vibe you got with the characters, or at least how they
Hmm.
are on the outset, rubbed
Hmm.
off on
Yeah.
Coppola. That being said, I wouldn't really say that that bothered me. I think it worked for the story. And
Mm-hmm.
again, I do think it's all sort of about keeping a guys. At
Mm-hmm.
least at least to me, I'm meaning more with Michael and Vito. Uh, but I did also think it was kind of interesting when you said that Frito was like the most sympathetic character, and in a way, he is kind of like, well, until he, teams up with Mo Green, even though Mo
Mm-hmm.
Green is basically conspiring against the family.
Mm-hmm.
He and Connie are both kind of the more actually pure members of the Corleones in a way. The really
Mm-hmm.
the more arguably actually the more innocent members of the
Mm-hmm.
Corleones
Yeah.
than Michael is. But on the other hand, it's like can't really say that like I really sympathize with Frito too much. I mean, he is still complicit in his family's corruption. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and even if he like, you know, and and you could say the same thing about Connie too, though, like she doesn't outwardly engage with it as much as the rest of the family does until she basically
Wait,
tried.
was she the Talia Shire character?
Yes, she was the daughter that
Okay.
got married at the beginning. Um,
Mm-hmm.
like until she, tries to get Sonny to beat up her abusive husband, though.
Oh yeah, and that famous sequence where he beats him up in front of the Thomas E. Dewey poster and the fire hydrant and the railing. That I remembered they spoofed that onto the Simpsons. They did it on the Simpsons episode where they literally spoofed that sequence. And I didn't know it was directly referenced from The Godfather. That was what I was going to mention because before I watched this movie, the only way I knew about The Godfather was through parodies in television and other movies, and The Simpsons was the only one that basically gave me the whole plot of what was going on. And I hate that it gave it away for me, but it was like basically it gave me the whole story. But yeah. It was a pretty interesting sequence in that picture, even though it was spoofed for a different purpose.
Yeah, and like I said before, even though I love this movie and I love that it's still in the cultural conversation, I I mentioned this in episode two. The
Hmm.
Go watch that one, the Zootopia episode. That even as much as I love this movie, like I do think there have been way too many parodies of it over the decade. It's especially like,
Hmm.
hey, it's especially prominent as being parodied in like children's films and TV shows like Zootopia.
Hmm.
And it is
Hmm.
sort of like after a while, it's like, hey, look, I get you want the target audience's parents to laugh at something that's clean and you can get away with, but there are other beloved R-rated films in the world, guys.
Hmm.
But again, I went more into a rant on it there. But yeah, like I said, like if anything, like the best way it's been kept in the cultural conversation recently in years isn't the constant Don Vito impressions or the
Hmm.
the how dare you come on the day of my daughter's wedding jokes. It's
Hmm.
that the scene where Don Vito says
Look how they massacred my boy.
it has become a meme on the internet recently, and I think
Hmm.
like anytime someone's like upset with like a reboot number 346 or sequel number 772 for some reason, especially in how
Hmm.
it handles the characters. Like I've seen people say, like s use that image. Look how they massacred my boy. So,
Hmm.
all right, studios, if you're watching this, even though you probably aren't, let's retire. How dare you come on the day of my daughter's wedding? Let's
Hmm.
retire the horse head scene references. Let's
And
start
also, let's
reference.
retire the making of The Godfather, which they did as a miniseries on Paramount Plus.
I actually enjoyed that. I didn't like the first episode, but the other episodes I thought were good. But yeah, let's make that the new thing that people constantly parody about The Godfather. Although actually, you know what?
Hmm.
I will say the only like upside to The Godfather being constantly referenced in children's shows is my first reference to The Godfather was not of the wedding scene. It was
Hmm.
it was on the show Pepper Ann. They
Hmm.
referenced the horsehead scene. So that's how I found out what The Godfather was in the first place. But
Hmm.
but I will also say, turning back to turning it over back to you,
Hmm.
like what I am kind of curious about is like because I said that I can kind of see why you would find Fredo the more sympathetic character, but like, do you think he could be do you think you would have liked the movie better if he was the lead? Because honestly, I don't think there's really much of an arc with him.
As much as I want him to be the lead, I always find him to be somewhat of a cursed character because as much as he's trying to keep the family together, even though in some scenes it's obvious that he's not as strong-willed as his brother Sonny is, because as you mentioned, he's a very toxic masculine man, and he always reminds me of other character actors who are very in that machismo, like macho, toxic masculinity way. And Michael, I think he's more like the brains, and he always reminds me of like I mentioned like a John Payne or a Robert Mitchum or any of those leading characters, and I forgot to mention because Sterling Hayden is in this movie, he also reminds me a little bit of him too. But as I said, if it were like a movie with just Frito and he was the head, or if it was focused on him, I mean, I wouldn't see that as like as a strong as a like a strong character performance because as you mentioned, he's not that strong. But I thought more about like his sympathy because of the fact that even though he is trying to be the best, he is trying to do what his family is offering him to do, even though as you mentioned, he's complicit. I just think that maybe his character would have been different had he, you know, having a spine or something like that that would make him sort of confident in doing these things. But again, the movie just gave you what it is. So yeah, that was. I mean, I don't know if it would have worked if he was a more strong-willed character, but if maybe we lived in an alternate world where he had a and there was much more development, that would have made the film more interesting. But I mean, it could have worked if it were done that way, but I don't know.
Yeah, I will also say like I guess when I'm also kind of curious, like, because like I said, well, I kind of understand what you mean by everyone reminding you of like character actors. Um, doesn't like I said, it doesn't really bother me. Guess I'm kind of curious, like why it sort of like bothers you so much.
Hmm. Um, I would say that as much as people like this film, I don't know how else I could put this, but it's a film that I felt like it's too recognizable. I just didn't the story was a little bit too predictable for me, and I just felt like there was nothing else that I would say is sympathetic, that I would say is interesting to me as I watched this film. So I think that's one of the reasons why I didn't like it.
No, I get that. It's understandable. I was focusing more on like the like the everyone reminds you of a character actor part.
Oh, because of the way that it reminded me of the character actors because of the way the performances were done on camera. Like each character has their own type of like uh personality. They have their own emotional reaction. That's why it made me think back to sort of these character actors because anytime you look at a character's emotions or their personality or the way that the character is performed, it makes you think back to, oh, this actor or this actor in the performances you may have seen in other films where they played almost the same type of character. That was the reason why it reminded me of that. It reminded me of character actors that I may have seen in the past.
Okay, so just more like it was reminding you of other actors and it was a little distracting then.
Yeah, it was more about their personality and their type. Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Yeah, well again didn't bother me. Doesn't really ever bother me. It's just like, oh cool. That
Hmm.
reminds me of that person. If an actor reminds me of another actor, honestly that's fine. Like there are just so many parts in the like there's so many just so many types of characters you can do in the world. You can create in the world and there's just so many other ways to interpret it and there's so many actors in the world that
Mm,
if an actor is reminding me of another actor, it doesn't really bother me that much if or
mm,
I find it like distracting or anything. So that's why
yeah.
I can't really say that bothered me or that distracted me personally.
Mm,
And sometimes I even joke about it. Oh, for example, the secretary from Ferris Bueller's Day Off, Edie McClurg, is the Timu version of Kathy Bates.
mhm. Very much. I guess the reason why I brought some of those character actors' names up is because maybe I watched a little bit Noir Alley on Turner Classic Movies, and they always talk about like different character actors and all the big names of film noir who later went on to do other movies. But yeah, I always try to get my knowledge on like and on the character actors and the types of roles that they played. And I know I want to go a little bit back to when you mentioned about Roger Corman giving a start to Francis Ford Coppola. I know that he also made an appearance in the second film, and he also would appear in other movies for the filmmakers whom he gave their start, most notably like Joe Dante, or maybe Joe Dante, or maybe another one would be Jonathan Demme, or another one would be Ron Howard, or any of those directors who would always cast Roger in their movie because he was a very important figure in sort of the new Hollywood wave cinema from 67 up until the early 1980s. So it's pretty impressive that it's pretty impressive that without Corman, even though he just passed away, I think like a year or so ago,
Yeah. Yeah.
I yeah, yeah. I still think of him as, even though he was a very influential man, I thought he was an interesting guy because I never thought of him just as like the king of the bees. He also was very much helpful in launching, besides the careers of directors, of actors, screenwriters, producers, and he was able to bring in international movies to the United States. The works of Bergman, Fellini, Kurosawa, Francois Truffaut, all these filmmakers um, that I thought I never expected him to be, not just a guy who made B movies, but also a guy who knew his taste of what types of movies he liked. Uh, I just thought he's an interesting guy after I started to get to know him from like reading his bios and just seeing his appearances on whatever he was doing. DVDs, TV appearances, and maybe podcast appearances, which I thought was pretty interesting.
Yeah.
And
If
he's
any,
like a part.
sorry.
Yeah, no, no, go ahead.
I was saying, if anything, um, he's kind of like the past generation's Lloyd Kaufman in a way.
Hmm. Yeah, the Lloyd Kaufman, the maker of Troma Entertainment. Uh, I think I might have seen one of the films that that his company made. But I always thought of Roger not just as a guy who knew about the whole nuts and bolts of the business, but he also knew how he was also part of that philosophy of you make more with less money. And when he made his films, he always did it with low budgets because the more creative you have with low budgets, the more freedom you have with ideas, even if you have like a even if you have like a thin schedule on your on whatever movie you're making. And I thought that he was sort of like I thought of him as more like a sort of a patriarchal figure of the generation of filmmakers that would come in the 60s, 70s, and so on and so forth. And I just thought of him as that type of figure because not only was he, as I said, bringing a lot of these people into now legends, but he also knew that even though he was making films that were sort of B-movie types, he knew also how to find good talent, and he also know how to find good people in the business. And if they always had a favor of letting him be in their film, maybe in a small role or in a cameo, it's a tribute or an homage or paying respect to the person who let them into their business by saying you can be in one of my movies in a small role or something like that. And I thought that's what I like about the sincerity and the the really good uh, the really good business tactics and acumen of this Hollywood legend.
Yeah. And when I said that, you know, Lloyd Kaufman is kind of like a current generation Roger Corman. I didn't mean like just like Corman, he did
Hmm.
kickstart a lot of careers, even as he did start off with smaller budget B movies. Like Corman, he does have a good eye for talent, and many people that were under his roster have gone on to big success. They're
Hmm.
both in ways like the godfathers of their industry. And
Hmm.
I think that's a good place to end it. Thank you again, Jordan, for coming on.
Oh yeah, thank you. Yeah, no problem. I mean, this one was a bit of a tough one for me, but if I can find another one that maybe I like and maybe you dislike, maybe we could bring it up and discuss it in another episode.
Yeah, well, before we go, Jordan, just remind everyone again where they can find you.
Okay, so you can find me on Film Talk with Jordan Ramirez. My podcast is Film Talk with Jordan Ramirez. You can find me on Spotify, Spotify for Creators, and on YouTube podcasts. I am available on Instagram and on Facebook, and you can reach me over there at Jordan Ramirez. And you can also follow my podcast at the on Facebook as well.
Yep. And next time, we're going back to a movie that is it that I dislike, but my guest likes. We are going to be talking about a cult classic from the 80s. See you then.